nuclear plant that had that other explosion again today. And were that radiation to get bad, were the wind to be unkind and come this direction, radiation levels here could increase and increase substantially. And that has worried many. There are long, long queues here in the city centre for petrol, also queues at supermarkets for real basics, water, biscuits, those sorts of things. Not so much that people expect to be going anywhere, but people do have this feeling that they may at some stage have to hunker down. If the radiation level in the cities go up, they may not be able to leave, they may be advised to stay indoors, and that means they want their supplies there. At the moment, though, no mass exodus from Tokyo. I came through the airport on Tuesday afternoon and there was no mad rush to get out. Some international companies are withdrawing their staff from Tokyo. We heard today an Indian software company, Tata Consulting, was withdrawing its staff from this city, and some governments now are advising against all but essential travel to the capital. Both the British and Australian governments giving effectively that advice.
And I guess, Andrew, these kind of pull-outs from the country must be having an impact, an even bigger impact, on the country's economy. Japan has the third biggest economy in the world, and we've already heard that the stock market has fallen 10.5%, its third biggest fall ever. What's the short-term outlook there?
Well, 10.5% today, but that, of course, adds to the 6% or so that it fell yesterday, so 20% over 2 days. That is a huge fall. We haven't seen falls on the stock market here in Japan on that scale since the late 1980s, with the huge financial crisis that occurred then. So, yes, very, very serious. We're getting these rolling blackouts countrywide because electricity supplies are low as well. All this having a very severe impact on Japanese GDP. And the Japanese economy, of course, not in the best shape anyway, heavily in debt anyway. So really, this is the last thing this economy needs, and it's going to take a very, very long time before we even start turning the corner on the economy. Of course, much bigger concerns in the short term before that is properly considered at all.
Thanks, Andrew. Andrew Thomas there in Tokyo. Earlier we heard from Teimur Nabili. He's in Akita in northwest Japan. Now, as we've been hearing, the big fear in Japan is that a nuclear catastrophe could be imminent. That comes as we're hearing that the death toll from the disaster has now topped 3,300. Dan Nolan has been looking closely at what may be happening inside those reactor buildings in Fukushima.
This is a model of Fukushima nuclear power plant on Japan's northeast coast. Tuesday's most serious blast hit at 6:10 a.m. at Unit Number 2. Later, officials say spent nuclear fuel in Unit 4 heated up, sparking a fire and possible hydrogen explosion there. It follows Monday's blast in the building housing Reactor Number 3. On Saturday, the first hydrogen explosion tore through the Number 1 reactor. Let's go inside Reactor 2 now to see how this could trigger a meltdown. The uranium fuel rods in the core are kept cool and safe by pushing water through the reactor vessel. To shut off the nuclear reaction, control rods were inserted immediately after the earthquake. But the tsunami damaged the standby water pumping system 1 hour after the quake. The level of water fell, exposing fuel rods to the air, and the temperature of the core rises. The fuel rods are half exposed, and engineers are trying to inject seawater to cool the core. If the fuel rods are not fully resubmerged and remain exposed, a meltdown occurs due to heat build-up from radioactive decay. The core will start to melt through the reactor vessel, then burns through the steel containment and the concrete floor of the reactor building, which takes less than 24 hours, causing what scientists call a total meltdown. A different threat is emerging in Reactor Vessel 4, even though it was shut down before the quake for maintenance. Here the problem is occurring in what's called the pond, a 12-metre deep pool of water that cools spent fuel rods. The water level is now dropping several metres, exposing the top section of 20 years' worth of spent nuclear fuel rods, whose cladding is heating up and burning, releasing large amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere.
Imad Kaduri is a nuclear scientist and joins me now in the studio. Mr. Kaduri, thanks again for joining us. What do we know about the efforts being made right now to stabilize these reactors?
The efforts are not succeeding, unfortunately, because the explosions yesterday, their time, were very significant. The one at Plant 2, which was underneath the reactor vessel, and the one in Plant 4, which was not functioning when the earthquake hit, but it was in the spent fuel storage area burning. It's not explosion. They don't know what the explosion was caused by. So these two events are very serious indeed, especially the one on the spent fuel. In that station, there are 6 nuclear plants. Number 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6. 1 and 3, their roofs have been blown up. Now, on top of each of these plants is a swimming pool, which contains the spent fuel of many years past, some of them up to 20 years. The nuclear reactor itself holds about 100 tons of uranium. These spent fuel swimming pools, they hold 200 tons of uranium, spent fuel. So what happened in Plant 4 this morning, apparently that the water level of the spent fuel tank was so low that it exposed some of the uranium rods, and there are thousands of them in that pool, that the shield, the cladding, oxidized, and then it burned, and then it released the radioactivity in the air. That's why in that building, Plant 4, the radiation, when it happened, was 100,000 severed, 100 times more than normal. Now, these are bad omens, actually, of what's... I had the impression 3 days ago that they will be in control, that the expertise, Japanese expertise and scientists will be in control of these events. And now I'm losing my hope. I am a bit pessimistic now.
Now, the government is saying that wind direction is going to be crucial right now, because we did hear that some of that radioactive material was being blown out over the Pacific Ocean. But if it starts moving inland, what kind of levels of radioactivity are we talking about here?
I don't know what levels it will reach, but if these spent fuel tanks, one of them does burn, the fuel inside, or the reactor does melt, the nuclear fuel does melt, and the radioactivity escapes in there, it's a lot scarier. It's like a 3 Mile Island when 1/3 of the reactor melted. But the prevailing wind from now until a few days, I just checked the meteorological mappings, is going to be still heading west. So, east, I'm sorry. So who will be affected will be the west coast of the United States within 7 days to 12 days. The prediction until Friday, today is Tuesday, until Friday, that the stream winds will be still going east. So until there's a drastic change in the wind pattern, the rest of Japan is relatively safe. There's no plume, radioactive plume. The plume is being blown across the Pacific Ocean.
Okay, so let's leave it there for now. Thanks again for joining us.
You're welcome.